The sky was gray that morning, but no one seemed to notice. The silence inside the funeral parlor felt heavier than the small, white casket in the center of the room, surrounded by soft flowers and stuffed animals that once belonged to Ava. I sat in the front row, eyes fixed on nothing in particular, too numb to cry. My wife, Emily, sat beside me, but it felt like a wall stood between us. She hadn't spoken in days. Since the news at the hospital, she was only a shell of herself. Ava was 6, a fragile heart, they said. It started like a regular cold, but within 2 days, she was in the ICU. The last time I saw her eyes open, she was gripping my finger and asking, "Are we still going to the park on Sunday, Daddy?" At the hospital, I begged the doctors not to turn off the machines. I pleaded, but the charts, the protocol, the numbers, none of it gave space for hope. No brain activity for over 12 hours. They said it was time. We said yes because we were told it was the right thing to do. But deep down, I never truly believed it. The funeral was arranged quickly. Everything was in place. The flowers, the soft instrumental music, relatives who flew in overnight. Then the hospital's chief physician arrived. Part of the official process, he had to confirm death in front of the funeral staff. He walked up to the casket, checked Ava's pulse with 2 fingers, a brief robotic motion. Then, barely glancing in my direction, he muttered, "She's not breathing. You can close the casket." It was like he flipped a switch on the world. For a moment, everything went silent. No footsteps, no whispers. Just that sentence. I stood up slowly. The man from the funeral home nodded and began walking toward the casket to seal it. But something inside me screamed. I crossed the room and stood over the casket. The flowers separated me from her face. Her skin was cold, but peaceful. A kind of calm I didn't understand. I leaned down, hand trembling, and touched her cheek. "I'm so sorry, baby," I whispered. "Daddy couldn't protect you." Emily stayed seated, staring at the floor. No one moved. It was like the room held its breath for me. And then I saw it. At first, I thought I imagined it. A twitch? My mind playing tricks? But no. I saw her lips move, slowly, like they were trying to form a word. No sound, no strength, just life. I froze. Time stopped. The funeral director had his hands on the casket lid when I yelled, "Wait!" Everyone turned. She moved her lips. I saw it. She's trying to say something. The doctor sighed. "Sir, post-mortem reflexes are common. The body may still show motion. Please, I know this is hard." "No! It wasn't a reflex! She moved her lips! I saw it!" I shouted louder than I meant to. My voice cracked, not with grief, but something unfamiliar. Hope. Emily stood. For the first time in 2 days, she looked directly at me. She walked to the casket, kneeled, and saw it too. "Oh my God, Ava, baby," she whispered, covering her mouth. The room fell into stunned silence, and then, so faint it could have been imagined, Ava's lips moved again. Gasps filled the room. Chairs scraped the floor. Some people stepped back instinctively. Others moved closer, peering in disbelief. My heart slammed against my ribs as I watched her lips twitch again. Slow, silent, but unmistakably alive. I grabbed the edge of the casket, trembling. "She's moving," I whispered. "She's really moving." Emily was frozen beside me, hands shaking, tears welling in her eyes for the first time in days. Her mouth hung open, as if her soul had caught up to her body all at once. The doctor stepped forward, his brows furrowed, face pale. This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "Step aside, please." He leaned into the casket, checking Ava's neck and chest, his fingers pressing for a pulse. For a moment, no one breathed. And then his voice cracked, quiet and shaken. There's a pulse. Faint, but it's there." Someone in the crowd sobbed out loud. A woman dropped her prayer beads. Emily fell to her knees, gripping the edge of the casket. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" She kept repeating, like a chant, like a prayer she never thought she'd dare whisper again. The funeral director backed away in silence, his face drained of color. One of the nurses who had accompanied the doctor took out her phone, hands trembling as she dialed emergency. The doctor didn't wait. He barked, "We need to get her back to the hospital, now!" I didn't move. I couldn't. My eyes were locked on Ava. Her eyelids fluttered, like the wings of a weak bird trying to fly again. Her lips, still pale, parted slightly. And then, as if drawn by the impossible, she made a sound. A soft breath. A single broken syllable. D. Dad. It shattered me. I collapsed against the casket, covering my face, the sob catching in my throat too big to come out. I had waited to hear her voice again, in dreams, maybe in memories. Not here. Not in the middle of a funeral. Emily reached into the casket, gently cradling Ava's little hand. "She's cold, but warm. How is that possible?" she asked, eyes wide, looking up to no one in particular, almost speaking to God. The doctor was frantically calling someone now, speaking in technical terms, throwing around words like reanimation, irregular synaptic response, post-mortem anomaly. But I didn't care about the science. I didn't care what name they gave it. My daughter was alive. The sirens arrived faster than I remembered them ever coming before. The paramedics didn't question what they were seeing. They looked stunned, but they moved quickly. Ava was gently lifted from the casket, her little body limp but breathing now in slow, rhythmic intervals. One of the medics had tears in her eyes as she checked Ava's vitals. "I've never seen anything like this," she whispered. A hush had fallen over the mourners. Many of them were praying, others staring in complete silence, holding each other, not knowing whether to be horrified or awestruck. As the gurney rolled past me, I followed close, not letting Ava out of my sight for a second. Her fingers twitched again as they placed the oxygen mask over her face. She didn't fully wake, but she was there, somewhere behind those fluttering lids and faint breaths. Emily clung to my arm. "Do you think she knows? Do you think she heard you?" "I don't know," I said honestly, "but something happened. Something we don't understand." The doctor pulled me aside as the ambulance doors were being shut. "Her vitals are low. This may still turn," he said, quietly, cautiously. "She may not survive long, or there may be neurological damage. We still don't have answers." I stared at him. I saw the doubt in his eyes, but also something else, something that looked a lot like fear. "Do you think she was really gone? Dead?" I asked him. He hesitated. I pronounced her, myself. Flatline, no pulse, no brain response for hours. There was nothing. And yet, here we are. The doors closed. The ambulance sped away. And I stood there, in the rain, staring at an empty casket and realizing the world I knew no longer made sense. But maybe that was the point.
The hospital room was dim and still. Machines blinked softly, measuring every beat, every breath, as if the universe itself was holding vigil through cables and screens. Ava lay on the bed, pale and motionless, but her chest now rose and fell with gentle rhythm. It wasn't much. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was something. Doctors moved around her with quiet urgency. Neurologists, cardiologists, experts who'd seen everything, and now faced something they couldn't explain. They spoke in low voices, as if the room itself might be listening. "She shouldn't be here," one of them said outside the door. "There's no explanation for this, nothing medical. She was clinically dead. Even if there was a misreading, 12 hours? This doesn't make sense." They said the words as if they were curses. I heard them all. Inside the room, I sat beside Ava, holding her hand, rubbing it gently between my palms. It was warmer now, still weak, but not the cold stillness of death. No, she was here. Somewhere behind those closed eyelids, behind the slow, labored breaths, was my little girl. Emily hadn't spoken much since we arrived. She stood by the window, arms crossed, staring out into the night. Her face was blank, like a wall thrown up to keep everything out, or in. I couldn't tell anymore. "She could still go," she said softly, her voice without tone. I looked at her. "But she hasn't," I replied. Silence again. The doctors ran another test, more scans. They whispered about oxygen levels and neural activity. They prepared us for brain damage, for permanent coma, for nothing at all. They tried to give us hope, then immediately pulled it back like it was a dangerous thing to hold. But I remembered her lips forming that sound, that Dodd. That wasn't reflex. That was her. I walked out of the room for a moment, overwhelmed, heading to the hospital chapel, not because I believed it would fix anything, but because I had nowhere else to go. The space was small, empty, lit by flickering candles. The scent of wax and old wood filled the air. I sat on the last pew and stared at the cross on the wall. "I don't know if you're there," I said aloud, voice cracking. "But if you are, I need to understand. Why now? Why like this?" My voice broke into a sob. "I held her body. I buried her. I watched the life go out of her. And you gave her back? Why? To take her again?" The silence in that room was like an answer I didn't want to hear. Back in Ava's room, something had changed. Emily stood at the foot of the bed, her hands pressed together. The nurses were quiet. The doctor who'd declared Ava dead earlier now stood with arms folded, staring at the monitors. "She moved again," one of the nurses whispered, her fingers just a flick. We rushed to the bedside. Her hand twitched. Then her eyelids fluttered. Not random, not reflex. Slowly, shakily, they opened. Her pupils were unfocused at first. She blinked, her lips parted, and she breathed a word. Not loud, not perfect, but clear. Emily dropped to her knees and sobbed, her head against the mattress, shaking. I stood frozen, afraid to breathe. The doctor stared. He checked the monitor again, as if the machines would explain what his eyes couldn't. Then Ava's eyes found me. "Daddy," she whispered. I crumbled. Tears poured down my face, not from grief now, from something bigger, something that felt like being forgiven by the universe. Doctors moved fast again. More tests, more vitals, more data they didn't know what to do with. But all I could do was hold her hand. The news didn't break yet. No one outside the hospital knew. But the feeling, it spread. Nurses who normally kept their heads down now lingered near our door. A janitor paused outside and whispered a prayer. One doctor came in without saying a word and knelt by the bed and placed a hand gently on Ava's foot, just to feel that she was real. Something had shifted. Not just in that room, but in the people around us. A kind of quiet awe, like everyone had stepped too close to something sacred and didn't know how to name it. Maybe it wasn't a miracle. Maybe it was an anomaly, a glitch, a biological fluke. But in my heart, I knew better, because I had held her cold hand, and now she was calling me Daddy again.
It started with a question. "Daddy, why were you crying next to the white box?" I froze. Emily's head snapped toward me. We had only just begun to feel safe, to believe Ava was truly back with us. Her vitals had stabilized. She was awake, weak, yes, but aware. More aware than any of us were prepared for. I sat on the edge of the hospital bed, trying to keep my voice steady. What white box, sweetheart?" Ava looked at me with those wide, innocent eyes. The same eyes that used to look up at me during bedtime stories. The same eyes I'd closed with trembling fingers when I thought I'd lost her. "The one with all the flowers," she said softly. Emily's hands went to her mouth. I couldn't speak. That moment, my whisper, my apology, had happened just before the casket was sealed. No one told Ava. She had never seen it, never heard those words. She was supposed to be gone. "What else do you remember?" I asked, barely able to breathe. She frowned, thinking hard. I was floating, but not flying, just moving through everything. I saw you and Mommy, and the man with the shaky hands. He dropped his glasses, she giggled softly. Emily gasped. That happened. One of the nurses had fumbled her glasses during the funeral, in the back of the room. It had happened in silence, unnoticed by most. Ava had never been conscious or alive for that moment. "What else do you see?" Emily asked, stepping forward now, her voice shaky. Ava looked thoughtful. "There was a light, but it wasn't like a lamp or the sun. It was warm, and it felt like someone I knew but couldn't remember. I wanted to go to it, but then I heard Daddy say my name. He said, 'I'm sorry, baby,' and then everything pulled backward, really fast. I felt the world tilt under me." She remembered my words, not just the tone, the exact words. That was when I knew whatever had happened wasn't just a second chance. It wasn't a medical fluke. Something had let her back in. Emily sat beside me now, her face pale, but her hand firmly holding Ava's. The doctors, when we told them, were silent for a long time. Some avoided our eyes. Others just nodded, writing things down as if they were logging symptoms. No one dared to say what we were all thinking. One doctor,
the oldest of them, finally said what no one else would. She may have experienced something beyond the threshold. There have been reports, NDEs, near-death experiences, but not like this, not for this long, not this detailed. We were told not to share the story. At least not yet, the doctor added. It could cause panic, or ridicule, or bring people here who don't care about her, only about the story. But the story was already leaking. One of the nurses had told her sister, who posted something vague online, about a child waking up in a hospital after being pronounced dead. That single post went viral within hours. Speculations began, news vans appeared outside by morning. And Ava kept remembering things. She talked about voices she heard while unconscious, familiar ones. My father's voice, who had passed 10 years ago. He said you shouldn't be so sad all the time, she told me once, casually, while playing with a corner of her blanket. He still watches you. He said he was proud of how you never stopped singing in the car, even when you were alone. No one knew that about me. No one. It wasn't just memories anymore, it was knowledge. But there was more. One night she woke up crying, her body shaking, clutching her chest. I wasn't supposed to come back, she sobbed. Something tried to stop me. It was cold. It was angry. We called the doctors. They said it was a night terror, trauma from being resuscitated. But I knew better. She wasn't dreaming. She was remembering. Emily started lighting candles in the room, not for scent or atmosphere, but for protection. I don't know what brought her back, she whispered, but I think something else came close too. The nurses prayed now, quietly. Doctors tiptoed around the room. There was a sense, unspoken but shared, that Ava was not just a patient anymore. She was a witness. And what she'd seen hadn't finished with her yet. It started with the nurse. Her name was Lena. She'd been one of the first to care for Ava after she woke. Always professional, quiet, almost robotic. But something shifted the third night after Ava spoke about the cold thing that tried to stop her. Lena came into the room to check vitals, as she always did, but stopped halfway through. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the clipboard. Then, without warning, she sat down at the foot of the bed and began to cry. Not soft, polite tears, but the kind of crying that comes from something buried too long. "I lost my son," she said suddenly through sobs. "2 years ago, car crash. I never even got to say goodbye." We were stunned. She looked at Ava, who had reached out and was now gently holding her wrist. "He says he knows," Ava whispered. "He said it wasn't your fault. He said you don't have to keep punishing yourself." Lena's breath caught. No one in the room had ever heard her talk about her son, not once, and Ava had never met her before waking. After that night, things began to happen. One of the janitors who'd avoided the room due to creepy vibes now lingered outside just to wave at Ava. He brought her a handmade bracelet, muttering, "Don't know why, just felt I should." Ava smiled and thanked him. The next day, he quit drinking, a habit he'd battled for over 20 years. Emily began to change too. Her eyes softened. She held Ava more. She hummed songs again. Once, I caught her whispering into Ava's ear while she slept. "I thought I'd lost you, but I think I lost myself first." There was a stillness in the hospital now. Not the sterile kind, but a reverent one. Like the air had weight, like everyone was holding a collective breath, waiting for something they couldn't name. Then came him, a reporter, mid-40s, stern, cautious. He had fought his way through hospital security, claiming a source inside had tipped him off. He didn't want a photo, didn't care for interviews. He just asked one question: "Is it true?" We didn't answer, but Ava did. She looked up at him, eyes clear, voice steady. "Why don't you believe anymore?" He froze. "What did you say?" he asked. "You used to believe in things," she said softly, "before the plane crash, before your brother died." His knees buckled. He collapsed into the chair beside the bed. "How do you know that?" he asked, voice breaking. Ava just reached for his hand. He didn't publish a word. He left the hospital without saying goodbye, but before he did, he kissed Ava's forehead. That night, he deleted every draft of his exposé and called his estranged mother after 15 years of silence. Something was happening. Ava wasn't just healing, she was undoing things in people. Guilt, grief, distance. Whatever she brought back with her, it reached people, not through sermons or declarations, just her presence. I began to notice it in myself, too. I slept for the first time in days, not out of exhaustion, but peace. I stopped blaming myself. I held Emily's hand again. I started humming songs to Ava, even though she was already asleep. And when I looked at her, I didn't see a miracle anymore. I saw a message. Maybe she hadn't returned for us, but through us. Late one evening, as the hospital quieted and only the hum of machines remained, Ava looked up at me and asked, "Daddy, am I different now?" I hesitated. "You're still my little girl, but yes, I think you brought something back with you." She nodded, as if she already knew. "I think it wants to help people," she said simply, and she closed her eyes again, not in exhaustion, but in calm. Outside, the hospital lights flickered softly. Down the hallway, someone began to laugh for the first time in weeks. In the next room, a man who had refused treatment for months finally asked to see a priest. And beside me, a 6-year-old girl, who had once been declared dead, breathed steadily, peacefully, and carried in her silence the kind of hope that changed people without a single word. The day of Ava's discharge felt nothing like we imagined it would. There was no press conference, no camera crews, no hospital parade. Just a quiet morning, with soft sunlight pouring through the window, casting golden lines across her bed as nurses folded her clothes and checked her charts one last time. She was sitting upright, dressed in her favorite sweater, the pink one with the little stars. Her hair was brushed, her eyes were clear. She looked alive. Not in the usual way, in the way people look when they've seen something that leaves a light behind. Emily helped her tie her shoes while I stood by the doorway, unable to stop smiling. There was a time I thought I'd never see this again, never watch my daughter blink in sunlight, never hear her hum to herself while fiddling with a zipper. But here we were. The lead doctor, the one who had once said, "She's not breathing," came in with her final report. He didn't say much, just handed me the file, then paused before leaving. "We've scrubbed everything twice," he said. "No errors, no missed readings, no technical faults." I nodded. "So, what do you think happened?" He stared at the floor for a moment, then at Ava, who smiled at him with quiet warmth. "I don't know," he said simply. And for once, I think I'm okay not knowing. He shook my hand, then knelt by Ava's side. "Goodbye, little one," he said. "Take care of the world." She reached out and hugged him. He stiffened, surprised, then wrapped his arms around her gently. When he stood, I saw the glisten in his eyes. Outside the room, nurses hugged each other. Some whispered blessings. One left a small paper flower on Ava's wheelchair. As we rolled her through the corridor, people stopped to watch. Not out of obligation, not for gossip, but because something sacred was passing. The janitor who had quit drinking saluted. Lena stood at the nurse's station, hands clasped, smiling through tears. I think in their own way, every single one of them had changed, and Ava was the thread that connected all of them. At the elevator, Ava turned to me. "Can we go to the park, Daddy?" I felt something in my chest shatter, not from sadness, but from the sheer weight of gratitude. "We can go anywhere you want," I said, voice shaking. She nodded, satisfied. We stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, I looked at the hospital hallway one last time, and I realized we hadn't just brought Ava home. We were bringing home a version of ourselves we thought had died too. Outside, the air was bright and clean. The world looked familiar, but somehow softer. We walked across the parking lot. Ava took my hand, Emily took the other. For the first time in months, we moved in sync. No one asked for interviews, no one tried to stop us, as if the world understood this moment was not to be captured, only lived. At home, Ava went straight to her room. She pulled out her sketch pad and crayons and began drawing, quiet, focused, at peace. Later that evening, I peeked at the paper. It was a picture of our family, her, Emily, and me, standing in a field of light. Behind us, faint but present, were soft shapes of others, figures, some with wings, some just silhouettes. In the center of the sky, there was a golden door. It was closed, but a single line of light shone through the crack at the bottom. I didn't ask what it meant. I didn't need to. That night, we all slept in the same bed. Emily wrapped around Ava, I wrapped around both of them. And for the first time in what felt like forever, we belonged to this life again. Ava never spoke of the white box again, or the cold thing, or the warm light. She didn't have to. Her presence said everything. People talk about miracles like they're loud, like they're thunder or lightning, but sometimes they're just a breath that shouldn't be there, a heartbeat after silence. Sometimes a miracle is a little girl holding your hand in the morning and saying, "Daddy, I had the best dream last night." And you smile, knowing maybe it wasn't just a dream. Maybe it was a return. Not just hers, but yours too.